It's midseason award time. We're going to go through our offensive and defensive MVPs. We're also going to give you our Big 12 picks for the week here on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Sooners podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. It's also brought to you by Underdog. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code LOCKEDON and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. Josh, are you winning the bye week?
I think so, yeah. Undefeated so far in 2022 in the bye week. So, no, it's a nice little reset week, obviously, for Oklahoma. Given the way that this season started out for OU, probably at any point, a bye week was going to feel okay, right? To just reset and recalibrate things. It sits a little bit better coming off the victory over Kansas, but no impending doom this weekend for the Sooners. So that part, hey, it's positive. We get to just sit back and watch everybody else.
Yeah, it would not be very much fun coming into a bye week on a 4-game losing streak, but thankfully they righted the ship at least for 1 week against Kansas, and we get to sit here and talk about some midseason awards. So let's start on the defensive side of the football, because I think this might be a quicker conversation than offense. If you could pick somebody to be the defensive MVP for this team that's been giving up 40 points a game pretty much every week the last few weeks, where would you go? Where would you be looking?
Well, the first couple of weeks, I would have thought that it was a slam dunk, either Ethan Downs or Reggie Grimes for defensive MVP. And now here we reconvene with 6 games in the books for Oklahoma, or 7 games rather in the books for Oklahoma. And man, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I guess probably Billy Bowman. I think that we've seen the impact that he on the secondary has on this defense, and really just kind of across the board, run support too. So probably his direction. And if not him, then Deshaun White for me.
Yeah, I think Billy Bowman is kind of a choice that makes a lot of sense, because it seems like as he went down, a lot of the other issues kind of came to the surface, especially in the passing game. So I think that's a really good choice. Deshaun White's an excellent choice as well. I feel like he's played well in spurts, had a really good kind of finish to the game against Kansas. I felt like his first quarter against Kansas wasn't great, but played well throughout the rest of the game. It's interesting. There's not really one person that really strikes me, as I just think about the defense and think about the kind of the playmakers, the guys who've made the most tackles. I mean, Danny Stutzman and David Agwebu, they lead the team in tackles, but I can't really point to either of them as maybe being this defense's best player. And that's kind of where we're at right now with this defense, is that you can't really look at it and say, okay, that's easily the best player on this defense. There's a lot of improving that still needs to do. So let's flip to the offensive side of the football. Where would you go for offensive MVP?
I mean, I think it's pretty easy on offense, right? It's got to be Dillon Gabriel, got to be the quarterback. How pronounced was the difference for OU minus Dillon Gabriel? This team cannot win football games as currently constructed, John, minus Dillon Gabriel. That, to me, makes it a pretty easy argument for most valuable player, really either offense or defense. OU's not beating anybody in 2022 minus Dillon Gabriel. I think that much was clear with the end of the TCU game and obviously all of the Texas games. So to me, I mean, that's a slam dunk. There's other arguments that you could make. I would entertain an argument for Eric Gray. I think for Oklahoma offensively, Marvin Mims would be another guy that would be an easy argument to make for the Sooners. But man, I mean, again, the buck kind of begins and ends, I think, with Dillon Gabriel.
Yeah, everything that you want to do offensively, you have to have your quarterback because this team doesn't move the ball otherwise. They did it for a little bit in that Texas game when they were running Wildcat, but they couldn't punch it into the end zone. It was not consistent enough for an entire drive for them to actually get points. So yeah, it's Dylan Gabriel. There's really no other choice at this point. Yes, love Eric Gray, love Marvin Mims. Braden Willis is having a really, really strong season as kind of a breakout player, but you can't go anywhere other than Dylan Gabriel with that one. So let's kind of talk about that one then. Breakout player of the year so far in 2022.
Does anybody just jump straight out for you? Like, who would be the first couple of names that come to mind? I mean, Braden Willis, maybe as a breakout guy. We sort of saw that one maybe coming from a mile away. And I don't know. I think maybe you could even throw a different name at me, and I would probably go with that a little more willingly, just because, again, Braden Willis, I wouldn't argue with it because obviously he's having his best season on campus, but it's like we've seen Braden Willis produce before and we knew this was going to happen. We thought, right, with Braden Willis, and maybe I'm docking him in that regard because of that, and that's unfair. But who else would be in that mix for you?
Yeah, just quickly on Braden Willis, I think a lot of it just comes down to opportunity. He just didn't have a full opportunity to really put on tape what he can do because he's splitting reps with Austin Stogner and Jeremiah Hall, for better or worse. Like, those guys were really good players in their own right, but now he's getting an opportunity to be a starter and play a large majority of the tight end one snap. So I still think he's having a breakout season, but I think you're right. We knew of the impact blocking ability. Like, he makes good catches in the passing game, like that catch against Oklahoma State, where he kind of goes up over two defenders and makes a clutch touchdown reception there before the end of the half. Huge, huge play. Eric Gray is a guy that kind of stands out because I think after last season, he was the biggest question. Like, the running back room was the biggest question mark on the offense heading into this season. And he's answered all the questions. Like, he's proven that he can be a 20 carry guy on this team and produce at a high level. He's proven to be the guy that you can run between the tackles if you need to. He can be a short yardage guy. Like, he's done everything that you need a complete back to do, and he's done it really, really well. I believe he's third in the conference right now in rushing yards, averaging 7.2 yards per carry. The dude's just having a fantastic season.
He is. And I mean, I'm just looking at the offensive grades for Oklahoma from Pro Football Focus. And again, probably I go to this well more often than some in our audience would like to. Like, oh my gosh, who cares about PFF grades? But it is interesting just seeing, one, I guess, set of graders out there that have Eric Gray. John, he's got a 90.1 offensive grade right now from Pro Football Focus. So that tells me that over the course of, if nothing else, right, okay, I'm not saying treat this thing like it's the gospel, Pro Football Focus, but at least one set of eyes is collectively looking at this thing and grading it for Oklahoma and saying Eric Gray has been really, really good. Outstanding. I mean, that is an outstanding grade from Pro Football Focus, 90.1 to this point in the season. And actually, Dylan Gabriel not too far behind that. For a quarterback, a grade of 85.4, pretty doggone good. But I'm with you. I mean, if you had to pick breakout candidate, Eric Gray, easy name to go with, because, and I'm guilty of this too, John. You know this, before the season, throughout the offseason, and this is always sort of going to be kind of how I operate. It's just how I'm wired for the most part. Show me, right? Prove it to me. Go out and produce and show it to me. I know the hype coming in from Tennessee, but we saw, glimpses of that last season. But this season, Eric Gray has been, right, the guy that we thought Eric Gray was going to be coming over from Tennessee.
I mean, they put him on the shelf last year, basically, in the last half of the season. So we didn't get a great opportunity to see who he was. And it kind of led to him being a little bit underrated heading into the year. I mean, some people even talked about the idea that maybe a Javonte Barnes or Gavin Sawchuk could be your starting running back at some point this year. But, Eric Gray's kind of done everything to kind of silence the doubters a little bit.
No, that's exactly right. I was just raising my hand as, I'm in that camp of the Javonte Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk group.
Yeah, so we've got a few more awards to hand out on the other side of the break. But first, let me talk to you about SweatBlock. Have you ever suffered with excessive sweating or odor? Well, maybe SweatBlock is the choice for you. Maybe that's what you need to look into for your deodorant. Is doctor created, doctor recommended, and can help you and help others, people that you love, people you care about, take care of their excessive sweating. You can get 20% off using our promo code locked on at sweatblock.com. It's also available on Amazon. Again, you can get 20% off using our promo code locked on at sweatblock.com. I've suffered with excessive sweating myself, being from Texas, Oklahoma, California, all my life. It's just being out in the heat, man, that sweat just pours. SweatBlock has the answer. So go to sweatblock.com, use our promo code locked on to get 20% off. Also available on Amazon.
We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, a new fun way to play. Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up college football season or NFL season or now NBA season, right? Which, friendly reminder for everybody out there, plenty of great locked on NBA, NFL content. It's not just us, though. Hey, I'm a little bit biased to Locked On Sooners, but obviously plenty of fun ways to play with Underdog Fantasy. It's so easy to play. It's available in over 30 states. Just pick between 2 and 5 players across any team, not just your Sooners. Decide if they're going to finish higher or lower. Just to give you a couple of examples, UCLA, Oregon, huge game in college football this weekend. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, 263.5 passing yards, higher, lower. Which way do you go on that? Charbonnet, the running back, talented guy for UCLA, 96.5, higher or lower there. Or what about Bo Nix? Same neighborhood, passing yards as Dorian Thompson-Robinson here, 264.5 passing yards. Are you higher or lower there? So that's an example of the easy-to-play options that you have. Just pick between, again, 2 and 5 players from any team, not just the Sooners. It's one of the easiest fantasy to play games out there, and you can win cold, hard cash in a single game. Sign up with the promo code Locked On. That's one word. And Underdog, they will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, get $100 free. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com or just download the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or Google Play Store. So we've got a couple of final awards to hand out. One of which being, impact freshman, both sides of the football for Oklahoma. Offensively, it would be probably dishonest of me if I didn't say at the midseason point, I'm surprised that we haven't seen a little bit more freshman-wise out of either a Jaden Gibson or Nick Anderson. I just thought the wide receiver core itself, John, really set up for one of those two guys to come in and make an immediate contribution. And really, Jaden Gibson has been given opportunities to be that guy, and unfortunately has had a couple of untimely drops. Defensively, it's I think pretty simple, right? The name that most people would point to is Jaren Kanak, though Robert Spears-Jennings sort of tossing his name into the hat here recently.
Yeah, I think offensively, the best freshman and probably the best freshman on the team so far has been Javonte Barnes. The guy's worked his way into the RB2 role with Marcus Major being out due to injury. He's really kind of usurped that. He's taken hold of that spot. And who knows what Marcus Major is going to be able to do, if he's going to be able to earn that back over the next few weeks. But Javonte Barnes got 20 plus carries in this game. Now his yards per carry average wasn't great. He's got some work to do as a goal line back, but you're trusting him with 20 plus carries in a big game that you need to win. That's huge. And that provides a lot of confidence for the kid as he continues to grow. I think defensively, you mentioned Jaren Kanak. That's the guy that, every time he's on the field, it just flies around. Like, he plays with so much speed. And RSJ, the same thing. Like, it just seemed different. Like, seemed like he was shot out of a cannon whenever he was tracking down Jason Bean along the sideline. So intrigued by the freshman. Like, if that's going to be what Brent Venables' defensive players look like, then sign me up, man. It's going to be a lot of fun because there's going to be a lot of fast dudes out there. Another one I thought would be really interesting is most underrated player through the first 7 games of the season.
Most underrated for Oklahoma. You tell me if this is low-hanging fruit here, but I think it's Dillon Gabriel. I think it's your most valuable player is your most underrated guy to this point for Oklahoma. And I'll, as we sit here and discuss, come up with another name to toss your direction too, but just let me make the argument real quickly for Dillon Gabriel in this sense. This is somebody that, John, after, you had the game where you dominated in Lincoln, a lot of the conversation was, yeah, he missed a couple of throws in that game, though. It actually could have been worse, right? Kansas State, you put up 40 some odd points and lose, obviously, at home. The conversation was, well, if you didn't have those untimely couple of incompletions that killed this drive or that drive, probably you beat Kansas State at home. So Dillon Gabriel had kind of become, I don't want to say the villain for Oklahoma fans, but he had become a martyr to a degree for some of this Oklahoma failure early in the season. And then, you turn around and versus TCU and Texas, and now coming on the heels of the Kansas game, man, if you don't understand what Oklahoma has at quarterback and how much better that is than any other option on campus. And, look, we're seeing good quarterback play across the league, John. I think you could make an argument that this is as good collectively as the quarterback play has been in the Big 12 conference since, I don't know, insert year from several years back, take your pick, right? It's across the board, really good quarterback play. But I still think Dillon Gabriel's in the top third of those said quarterbacks in this league. So the quarterback play that Oklahoma is getting is really, really good. And it, to me, I think is underrated to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid argument. I'm going to go to the offensive line, though. I think really the interior guys are playing really well. Chris Murray, Andrew Rame, and McCabe Matire, and we got to see more Robert Conjal this past week. But I think that they're playing good football. When you're loading up and you're running Wildcat, there's a lot of pressure on your offensive line to produce. And they did a very good job in the first half. Even though they weren't able to get into the end zone, they were still moving the football down the field. They were converting on short yardage attempts. And that's a lot on your offensive line, your interior offensive line, to do that. Obviously, Texas made some adjustments in the second half and were able to figure things out. But I think just the interior offensive line, just as a group, has played really, really well. We know Anton Harrison's really good. Wanya Morse is really starting to come on strong as well. But that interior group is really starting to kind of, I feel like, play their best football right now, opening up holes for Eric Gray, letting him get to the second level and make people miss and create some big plays. I mean, Eric Gray doesn't have the season he's having without the offensive line producing the way that they're producing. So that's kind of who I'd go to. And then, I don't know, the kind of last one I think we should maybe throw out there is just most improved player from a year ago.
Well, I think that probably a lot of times this is sort of hand in hand with your breakout guy. And so to me, I mean, I'm still kind of looking at Braden Willis's direction a little bit, right? Could he have done these same things last season or the year before? Okay, yeah, maybe, probably. But, I see somebody that clearly is playing his best football in a Sooner uniform in Braden Willis. So to me, that's an easy direction to go for most improved.
Yeah, I'll go with Jalil Farouk. I think after the Oregon game in the bowl, I thought a lot of us had high expectations for him. Excuse me. And he didn't really live up to that in the spring game or even in the first few weeks of the season, but he's really started to come on strong of late. He's been a really dynamic kick returner for them with Billy Bowman being out, and he started to make consistent plays in the passing game. He had 4 targets, 4 receptions this past week. That's what you want to see. Like, as your number 2 wide receiver, you want to see consistency. And he might not be the number 2, he might be number 3, but 2A, 2B with Theo Weiss. Those two guys are kind of on that same tier behind Marvin Mims. But you got to play with consistency. When the ball gets thrown your way, you got to make catches. And he's been doing a really good job at that, especially this past week. Obviously, there were not very many opportunities against Texas, but I felt like he was pretty solid in the opportunities that he received. So give me Jalil Farouk. It's a group that still has a lot of improving to do across the board, I feel like. And they can. Like, we've seen flashes from this team. If they can put it together consistently, that's going to help this team out quite a bit. All right, coming up, we're going to give you our Big 12 picks of the week heading into Oklahoma's bye week, but there's still some really, really great games on the Big 12 slate. But first, let me talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. They've got everything you could need, from odds on MMA, boxing, NBA, NHL, NFL, college football. It's all covered. Hey, the league championship series and baseball are happening. The NBA and the NHL are just now getting started. NFL is going strong. You got college football odds here as well. And you can get in on the action over at BetOnline. Again, it's the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Again, that's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Josh, this is our BetOnline segment of the week where we go down the Big 12 slate and look at the lines. So first off, we got Baylor hosting the Kansas Jayhawks. The Bears are getting 9.5 points and the over-under is 58 for this one. Baylor just coming off a game where they allowed 43 to West Virginia, scored 40 themselves. Kansas just scored 42 against Oklahoma. What do you think?
I mean, to me, this seems like an easy over game with that number where it's at right there, high 50s, 58, I think you said. I mean, to me, unless Dave Aranda somehow pulls all these strings together, I just don't think defensively this Baylor team is anywhere close to what we saw with Petrie and company a year ago. I mean, to me, they're gettable defensively. And Kansas with Bean, we saw it firsthand in Norman last week. Now, part of that obviously is some of Oklahoma's defensive problems at work at times. But, man, what Coach Leipold and Kansas has going on offensively, for them to be doing that with a backup quarterback is pretty impressive. I like the way that Kansas goes about its business. They're well coached offensively. I think Bean is a solid backup quarterback in this league. So all of that is to say I expect points in this game, John. I don't expect Baylor to cover that 9.5. I would pick Kansas to cover that spread right now. I'm not comfortable picking Baylor to beat anybody in this league by multiple scores at this particular moment in time. So I'm going to take Baylor to win the game at home. I do think there'll be plenty of points scored. I'm looking like Baylor 38, Kansas 34, something right there, 35. So I think there's going to be plenty of points. I do like Baylor to win. I don't like them to cover.
Yeah, 9.5 seems like way too much against one of the best offenses in the country in the Kansas Jayhawks. So yeah, give me Kansas plus the points in this one, and then give me the over as well. All right, the next one, another big one. I say big one. It's kind of a big one for those some of those teams vying for bowl eligibility at the bottom of the conference. You got Texas Tech hosting West Virginia. They're laying 6.5 points. They're 6.5 point favorites over West Virginia. The over-under is sitting at 65.
So on the radio side, we pick an upset special every week, right? Where you have to have the 5 points or more dog. I did not pick this game in West Virginia, though I did pretty seriously consider it. I think there's a chance that JT Daniels and company can kind of separate a little bit from the Texas Techs of the world in this league if they can, obviously win this game. That was a huge win for West Virginia over Baylor last Thursday night. So I expect this game to be very, very competitive, similar to kind of what we said about Kansas and Baylor. I think that there's probably going to be some, healthy amount of points scored both ways. Maybe not quite as pronounced as Kansas Baylor. I'm thinking Tech probably just because it's in Lubbock. I'm going to stick with them to win at home, and I'll say 34-30 Texas Tech. But don't be surprised if West Virginia walks out of Lubbock a victor.
Yeah, I kind of like West Virginia in this one, at least with the points, but I'm not sure it does cover or that it does hit the over. So give me West Virginia plus the points and the under on this one. And then we got here are the two big games of the week. These are the two that have Big 12 title implications. Texas -6 against Oklahoma State in Austin. The over-under is 60.
It's in Stillwater, right? The game's at Oklahoma State. I think it's in Stillwater.
My bad.
It's in Stillwater. Oklahoma State being the home dog that they are in this game, there's been some scuttlebutt out there about Spencer Sanders and his health. If he's got a shoulder injury, and, Mike Gundy kind of touched on that with reporters, but didn't totally share what was going on. And he certainly didn't share whether or not it was the non-throwing shoulder or the throwing shoulder. So I don't know. To me, the odds makers from BetOnline and, elsewhere clearly have to be looking at this thing, John, and saying, yeah, we're not sure that Spencer Sanders is totally healthy. And obviously he's not totally healthy. But, to me, I just think that the game in Stillwater, I think Sanders, to me, from what I could watch versus, Oklahoma State versus TCU, I didn't see a lot of physical limitations from Spencer Sanders watching that game. Now, again, I'm not sitting here saying that the guy's fully healthy. He's clearly not when you've got your head coach sitting up there answering questions about your quarterback's health status. But I don't know. To me, the naked eye watching him, I didn't see something that indicated to me, John, that physically he's dealing with a ton of limitations. So having said that, I do still think that Oklahoma State is the better of the two teams. The game is in Stillwater, so this has wrong team favored written all over it for me. I like Oklahoma State to win the game over Texas, so I'm taking Oklahoma State 34, Texas 27.
Yeah, and I'm going to go the other way. I think Texas is playing some pretty good football right now. And I think of the two defenses, they've got the better unit. And we know what they've got offensively with Quinn Ewers and Bijan Robinson and JT Sanders and Xavier Worthy. I just think it's going to be a little bit too much for that Oklahoma State defense that's been giving up a lot of points and struggled in the second half to slow down TCU last week. So give me Texas minus the points. And I want to take this one to go over as well. I think this is going to be another high scoring affair in the Big 12 because that's just what we do in the Big 12. We play high scoring football. All right. Final game. This one is for first place in the Big 12, getting the prime time slot. Hey, look at that. The Big 12 can put a game in prime time. Interesting. So TCU minus 3.5 point favorites in Fort Worth, hosting the Kansas State Wildcats. The over under is 53.
Well, and since this is our final game, I'm going to ping pong it back over to you and let you have the honors first here.
Yeah, give me TCU minus the 3.5. I just think they're playing really good right now. It's at home. I mean, it's a team that's battling and they're playing strong football. They know how to slow down a running quarterback because they see one every single week in practice and in Max Duggan. I mean, Adrian Martinez is a different animal. I just don't think they've got the skill talent to keep up with TCU. Now, I've said this before, and I was burned on it. I do think it's going to be a game that goes over. I do believe that they hit over 53, but I like TCU minus 3.5 to continue their undefeated season.
Yeah, I think it's the road factor at play a little bit for me here for Kansas State. Night game going down to TCU. Crowd clearly is going to be absolutely jacked for this game. Not that Kansas State, not that I don't think their coaching staff will have them ready or whatever. I don't know. It just feels like it sets up for Quentin Johnston to break a couple of big plays, chunk touchdown type plays, or Kendre Miller gets loose up the gut on one. Place goes crazy, and we'll see how Kansas State responds. This is believe it when I see it game with Kansas State. I mean, if they win this one, then all of a sudden they have home dates versus Oklahoma State and Texas in Manhattan to where really, I mean, Kansas State would be fully in the driver's seat at that point. I don't see by night's end that being the case. I do think TCU offensively a little bit across the board. Too much skill talent. I love Deuce Vaughn. I love some Deuce Vaughn. I really like what we've seen from Adrian Martinez so far this season. I just think while TCU to me is certainly not wildly imposing defensively what they're doing, I just think the overall collection of offensive skill talent in that game in night environment down in Fort Worth, I just think that they're going to find a way to win that game 31-27. I think it'll be a great game, but I'm picking TCU to win.
It's going to be a great weekend of college football action, as it is every weekend in the fall. So make sure, hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a great weekend with your friends, your family, watching some football, doing whatever you're doing. It's going to be some great weather, hopefully this weekend as well. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thank you so much for tuning in and subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcast. Now that you're done with Locked On Sooners, make sure you go check out Locked On Big 12 with our guy, Josh Neighbors. He takes you across the Big 12 in 30 minutes every single day, providing you all the insight that you need. Whether it's Oklahoma State, Baylor, Texas, Texas Tech, Josh has got you covered over on the Locked On Big 12 podcast. And until next week, where we will reconvene, he's Josh. I'm John. We'll catch you then. Boomer Sooner.